So welcome back to Behind the Screen. This is, in theory, video 11, and today's topic is character spotlight. And when I say character, you could probably interchange player a lot of the time because I want to discuss, how I approach focusing the game around one character for a scene or like a short sequence to highlight the importance of that moment to them. Um, Primarily because I'm going to be doing it later in my game, but it's also something that can be difficult to do well, and I wanted to obviously share how I approach it and learn from the community um, about how other people approach it. So as usual, start with a recap of the previous week's game. Um, so after vanquishing the undead warlock um, in the dungeon that I ran my players through, they returned to their camp on the surface. The party warlock lost his memories temporarily as a side effect of crossing the river, a river they had to cross over in the Shadowfell. But through a combination of reading his journal entries, the party just talking to him, and taking some time to rest and strengthen his connection with the Raven Queen, he got his memories back. And then they kind of returned back to the fort. Took a few days' journey, during which party sorcerer, keeping an eye out for more unique flora of the Shadowfell, found some dream fruit, which is just a fruit that when eaten, and it's a powerful sedative and hallucinogenic, so you get really strange dreams you don't want to wake up from. You don't want to do anything about after dreaming. And then sorry, my personal gratification. And then they go back to the fort. Party monk collected the breastplate that he'd commissioned the smith to make and gifted that to the warlock, so party warlock now has armor. And at the same time asked the smith to turn a boar tusk. They'd slaughtered the boar for meat on the way back. Asked him to turn the tusk into a weapon. And he said it'd be done by the next day. The party sorcerer collected leather skins, hides that he'd left with the smith to be tanned, and magical tanning is a wonderful thing when you want to speed the tanning process up. And then they debriefed and kind of went to bed. And then the next day was the day of returning. There was a portal party to celebrate the changing of the guard at the Shadow Watch fort. And the party's rogue and sorcerer decided to try and set up a narcotics business by shredding some deathroot, which is just this hallucinogen hallucinogenic plant found in the Shadowfell. When fresh, it has the contact property in 5th edition D&D, but essentially, if you want to use it in your own games, when it's fresh, if it makes contact with bare skin, it's powerfully puts you out for hours, hallucinogenic, and then the effects fade over time, and to the point where it needs ingesting through food or drink. So they're trying to set up a side business, as well as kind of find legitimate uses for these things. The sorcerer, I believe, is going to try to create a garden when he gets back to Scour to grow these plants in for research purposes, and kind of everyone else relaxed after spending a fortnight in the Shadowfell for the party, longer for the Knights Arcana. and then went through the portal when it opened. The party kind of were the last ones through, helping the captain, Ghost of Shadowmane. And they stepped through to be met with the Master of Novices, a dwarven fighter or Eldritch Knight, kind of asking the party fighter what he's doing there. And that's where we wrapped up, because it was a cliffhanger, and it was an interesting place to leave it and get my players kind of wondering what's happening next and talking about the game. So kind of pulling the curtain back, fighter's not in trouble. The fighter's going to be promoted because of surviving for a week in the Shadowfell and the services that they've undertaken for the Shadow Watch, who are largely unknown outside of the Knights Arcana and kind of function as an elite branch of it. And to get the party out of the city, the party fighter is going to be granted status of Shield of the Order, and kind of the idea is they're a traveling knight essentially. So that's the recap and a little preview. So right off the bat, something to state is that if you are going to focus gameplay time on a character, you need to be able to, or you should be able to read the table well enough to judge when people are getting antsy and want to be doing stuff that isn't focused on that character. And a lot of that is just kind of skill that will come over time, as with any skill. And like through time and practice, you'll be able to develop it. And it's a lot easier with groups that you've played with for a long time. Like this group I've been playing with nearly 2 years, so I can read them pretty well. But even with kind of one-off games, being able to quickly read players at the table is a useful knack to be able to have. Useful knack to have. Sorry. So it's something you need to bear in mind if you want to do character-focused scenes. Welcome to the chat room. And so reading the table, obviously important, to the point where I should probably make a note of that, so anyone who flicks through these videos can just go to the end, get a good feel for the table, know when to move on. And part of this, the first section, getting a good feel for the table, is knowing which players are happy to have a spotlight scene for their character. And I think, obviously, if you've been watching these videos, but I do character-driven stories because that's where the interest is for me in role-playing games. So I like to give characters screen time of their own, where they don't share it with anyone else. So I think that every character deserves kind of a scene, a spotlight every now and then anyway. But knowing which players are more comfortable with that is useful to know, and knowing how comfortable all your players are with having a spotlight on their character as well. So obviously, shy players will prefer shorter scenes. Less confident players will prefer shorter scenes. But on the kind of flip side of that, knowing how long everyone else at the table is going to be knowing how well knowing God, what's the word? Knowing how long they're happy to kind of take the back seat is a good idea. And I'm not saying that you should capitulate to quote unquote alpha players, because everyone at the table should be equal and should have a chance to have equal screen time, for want of a better word. But you should be able to get a feel for when to move on with a spotlight scene and kind of wrap it up from, say, more than half the people at the table are now kind of they want to be doing stuff as well. And a lot of the time, if you have a quote unquote good group, good's probably not the right word, group of like-minded individuals, everyone will be ready to move on at roughly the same time, theoretically. So it's not that much of a big deal, but but it's less about knowing when you want to move on and more about knowing when the players want to move on from a scene. So I think it's just kind of a reiteration of what I mentioned as part of that, but just limit time spent to what the player is comfortable with. Because I do lean more into the improvisational side of gaming and GMing, sorry. Scenes can run on a bit sometimes because I just keep thinking of things that could happen in them, and that obviously is a problem for some players when they want to be doing something else. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. And because the spotlight scene, to my mind, it should be focused on that character for a reason. So it should kind of have a purpose, and something like character development. And you don't want to have a scene that does nothing, especially in the situation I'm in where we've got 2.5 hours every week. Sorry, in a public environment. Our game has to be streamlined somewhat, and that helps a lot with keeping the narrative momentum going, but also where you are taking the scene, the screen, I guess, want of a better word, away from all but one of the players at the table. You don't want the other 3, 4, 5 players feeling like they're sitting there doing nothing for no reason. They should be able to see the reason for the scene and be happy to support the one player who is in the spotlight right now. And obviously, everyone plays for different reasons, and everyone has a different mindset. Some people are there just to deal as much damage as they can in combat. Some people are there to quote unquote win the game. However you do that. And then obviously there are people who are more into the role playing and the character development side of things. And obviously a lot of these design philosophies are very much from the perspective of someone who has a character development and storytelling preference and angle. So that is something to bear in mind. But try and have, if you have people at your table who are less interested in that kind of thing, try and have something obvious that the scene is about, even if that's not all it's about, just so that they know that you aren't ignoring them for quote unquote no good reason. Also, I suppose the inverted quote marks on good ignoring, but it's by the by. And the degree to which you need to have this explicit purpose obviously varies depending on players and on the table, but because by its nature a spotlight scene is pretty much a one-on-one scene, if it doesn't have a purpose, in my experience, that lack of direction does come across and kind of worsens the play experience. And of course, there's this the usual kind of keep everything interesting, keep it simple, so you don't overwhelm yourself. Um, but I think as a last point to this um, kind of list, and I know usually I have a kind of like a 3-point design philosophy for scenes and scenarios and dungeons and things, but something that bears stating is have a good idea of the character, because you don't, for the most part, I don't think you should be having spotlight scenes where they are, as I say, one-on-one scenes where the um, where what you have in mind for the character and where what the player have in mind for the character are different. Um, so, for example, in tonight's game, the um, the fighter is going to be kind of formally initiated into the Order of the Knights Arcana, and this is something that the player has said that they don't object to. They've started themselves on this path of kind of investigating no, introducing themselves to the Knights Arcana and um, going through the preparatory initiation process. So I know that they want to join, and then they don't. And I just use that as a starting point for a a perfect opportunity for a spotlight scene. And um, it's very important to know that, because if the player hadn't told me that and hadn't gone through that kind of sequence, and then I just take control of them and force them into the box I want them to go in, obviously it's no longer that player's character. It's my character. That player is just rolling dice for them. And player agency is something that I feel very strongly about and uh, wholly support. Again, for me, it's all about collaborative um, storytelling and creation, and that's why I started streaming on Twitch to kind of do community built creation. Um, and when I can't think of any topics to discuss here, I'll probably just do random kind of location generation or scenario generation or what have you, um, with chats support, because that collaborative creation is what really draws me to the game, and to a lot of the people I've been lucky enough to game with, sorry, have been into the game for the same reasons. So, putting into practice, uh, this will just be me talking through um, or creating the spotlight scene for tonight's session. So I know the purpose. Ah, uh, purpose: induct the fighter into Knight's Arcana as a shield of the order. And anyone who saw last week's episode 10, um, last week's episode, sorry, episode 10, will know that there is a magical shield being um, bestowed at some point, and this is where it will be bestowed, functioning as a +1 spell focus. So spell save and DC go up for the fighter because he needs the help, all the help he can get. So that's the purpose. This is what the player wants. As I've said, they've set themselves on this path. So some things to bear in mind: it can't be over long. Player she's not shy, but she's quiet, and I'm going to be using this scene to because we haven't really had many spotlight scenes so far. I've had kind of little ones dotted out here and there, but none for big character development purposes. So I'm going to use this one to evaluate her comfort level with it. But she's a quiet player. Not to say she isn't confident, but she is a quiet player. Also, there are going to be 5 other players at the table. One of the employees of the cafe that I run the game in asked to join, and spoke it through with my group, and they were happy with it. I was happy with it. I like having large parties, and happily he's rolled up a cleric, so that's going to solve the big gap in the party composition. But there are going to be 5 other players at the table, and there are other things I need to do in tonight's session. So necessarily this scene can't be too long, but I want to give it the import that it deserves as a big character development scene, and this is also the scene that's going to end level 6 for the party. Welcome. So it's going to have to be quite an intense scene in a way, and obviously kind of getting the balance between intensity and brevity is going to be difficult, and something I'm going to have to just kind of wing as I go, like with most things. So it's going to be an induction ritual. And I did some kind of preparatory research beforehand, and a lot of initiation rites begin with a separation of the inductee from society, and ordinarily then they'd go through kind of a trial and then be welcomed back as the role that they were being inducted to. So in this case, the fighter is not only going to be separated from the party, but also the other initiates. And this is to kind of hammer home the point that the shields of the order are kind of a branch of, are a separate entity within the Knights Arcana, because they do travel. They aren't restricted to the city. And obviously, in an adventuring party, you need someone who can travel. So having reasons for members of different factions to travel, if you do run games with factions in, is quite important. But it's also a good way of having built-in plot hooks. So induction ritual, separation of inductee from society. So I see this as being escorted from the courtyard to an induction hall, where there probably won't be an initiatory ceremony going on right now, because of the nature of the fact the portal's just opened and there's an honor guard for the Shadow Watch and the changing of the guard kind of waiting to go through. But then taken to a private room within the induction hall, and that's where the ceremony will take place. So it's kind of very clear that they are being separated from everyone else in the Knights Arcana. And then for the ceremony itself, obviously there's going to be some oaths, expectation, well, doing sensible order, expectation of service, demands of service, and then oaths, and then bestowment of position, rank, we'll say bestowment of rank. And then that's probably a good place to end it, and then move over to someone else. So the demands of service, obey and protect the order, protect the people, punish those who would misuse the weave. In Dungeons and Dragons, the weave is kind of the magical material that makes up the world, and spellcasters kind of use the weave to cast their spells. And then defend the defenseless as a general kind of, because these are an order of knights and they do have an obligation to protect the city and the people of the city, and as a shield of the order, the fighter will be the public face, if you will, of everyone outside the city of the order, and kind of has to be an example for people to follow. And then some suitably kind of arcane eldritch oaths. On the sword and the weave. Do you so swear? Sweat. Do you swear to? And then there'll be obey and protect the order. On your shield and your gifts. Do you swear to? And then protect the people. With clear head and steady hand. Do you swear to? Punish those who misuse the weave. And then as a bulwark against evil. Do you swear to defend the defenseless? So when the scene plays out, I'll probably reword the demands of service. A little bit, but on the whole, seems fine. And then the final part will be granted title of Shield of the Order. And bestowed with a I hope my brain is not this kind of foggy later. Oh, geez. Oh, my brain is completely clear right now. Granted title of Shield of Order bestowed with a. It's not icon, not trophy. Bear with me. To a thesaurus. Symbol. That's the word. Geez, that was symbol of your rank. Symbol of rank. Which will be this magical shield, which functions as a +1 spell focus. And then after that, the scene will shift to the rest of the party. And that is pretty much everything I wanted to cover today, I believe. So, summary, obviously. Understand your players, know how long they'll be comfortable with A, being in the spot, or their character being in the spotlight, and B, how long they'll be happy not being in the spotlight. And to some extent, that will rely on kind of your own feeling of momentum for the story, knowing when a scene has served its purpose and when everything has happened, uh, everything that should happen has happened. And as kind of part and parcel of that, knowing, structuring a scene to be as welcome as long as it needs to be for the player to be comfortable with it. Scenes obviously should always have a purpose, even if it's not explicit. However, because these are spotlight scenes, having an exactly that is so it's one of the chat's posted about session 0, and where you talk to your players about what they want from the game, and 100% do that. In this instance, I didn't get a session 0, but I have a lot of I have a constant conversation with my players about character motivations and things like that. But if you have the chance for a session 0, totally take it. And then yes, exactly, Kenny. I try and hammer that point home as often as I can in these kind of tip streams. But for people on the VOD and stuff, understand player characters through their players is a great way of avoiding railroading them or guiding them overly, as I believe I phrased it in another video. And then know when the spotlight scene has run its course after it served its purpose. And as I say, scenes should have a purpose. By understanding the player, the character. So this stream's been going about half an hour. I've discussed everything I want to on this, but so I'm going to end the YouTube recording, but I'm probably going to hang around, maybe play something for a little bit longer. So obviously, usual spiel, if you watch this on YouTube, I stream at twitch.tv/comradebubbles. If you want to watch any of my older videos and you're on Twitch, they're uploaded onto YouTube channel of the same name. the VODs are around for a while though on the Twitch archive. And obviously, if you like it, follow, subscribe, what have you, so you know when I go live, when I upload a video, which I'm horrendously bad at doing in a timely manner, but something I'm working on. But for now, YouTube, thank you for watching or listening. If you just kind of podcast this when you're doing other stuff. See you next week.